Did you know 90% of the world's data was discovered just in the last 2 years? And you have access to much of that knowledge right at your fingertips on your phone. What an incredible time to be alive, right? And yet with all this knowledge, are we any better for it? We see growing mental illness, political polarization, climate crisis, racial reckoning. We're burnt out and our divisions seem to grow, not shrink. Has all this knowledge made us any better at life? We have an abundance of knowledge and a scarcity of wisdom, but we need wisdom right now because wisdom is all about developing the discernment and the character to know how to turn knowledge into a life well lived, which is something we all want. We all want to live well, and data just isn't going to get us there. So during the season of Epiphany here at Salt House, we are seeking wisdom from the wisdom tradition in the Bible. We'll explore the 3 wisdom literature books. It's fun to think of them embodied as characters. So let us introduce you to Proverbs, the bright young teacher who teaches you how to be good at life. But then meet Ecclesiastes, the cynic grad student who isn't afraid to get into the darker truths of existence. And then there's our friend Job, the weathered old man who's seen it all, life at its best and its worst, and found God in the ashes. To these 3, we'll add the unique irrational wisdom of love from the book called The Song of Songs on the Sunday closest to Valentine's Day. And lastly, we'll hear from the foolish wisdom of Jesus that turns our worlds upside down. Each of these books of wisdom seem completely different from each other, yet holding them together, we see a full picture of biblical wisdom. Even in their differences, they all agree on 2 things. First, if you want wisdom, all you need is what the Bible calls the fear of the Lord, which is another way of saying you must start with the beginner's mind, that humble stance that says, God, you're the teacher and I'm the student. I know enough to know that I don't know. And second, if you want wisdom, you gotta ask. You gotta want it and must have a curious desire to become wise. The good news is that God promises to give wisdom freely and generously to absolutely anyone who wants it and is willing to learn. So do you want it? Do you desire wisdom? Then join us now as we are together seeking wisdom.
Well, this sermon could really suck. But in the end, it won't actually matter because it will end. And you'll move on. So let's just see what happens, shall we? You know, last week, Pastor Sarah kicked us off on our Seeking Wisdom series with an introduction to Proverbs. She introduced us to Lady Wisdom, and she talked about how when we are wise, we make good decisions, and we become righteous. And when we are foolish, we make bad decisions, and we become wicked. And the righteous who are wise live good lives, and the wicked live terrible lives. My gut reaction to that? That's cute. I mean, good decisions do lead to good things. Like, our actions matter. It's good and wise to take care of the poor. It's good and wise to think critically and not be misled by fools. I mean, good does produce good sometimes. And sometimes justice takes care of the wicked. Like, this Proverbs wisdom is true on some level. But I don't know about you, but I've known some wicked people. Some people who were unbelievably cruel and who narcissistically treated people like shit. And they got away with it. Do you know people like this? People who were just Teflon, that like nothing could stick to them? And then I've known some really good people, people who did the right thing, who were kind and tender-hearted, who like spoke their truth and fought for justice. And the wicked ate them for brunch. Do you know these people? Like, have you been these people? You know, Sarah used Tick, Tick, Boom, right, to start us off. She shared those lyrics, fear or love, baby, don't say the answer. Actions speak louder than words. And there's truth in this. But there's also truth that sometimes wicked wins. In fact, I'd suggest that we continue our conversation with wisdom with the musical Wicked. Has anybody seen Wicked? Wicked, yeah. So if you haven't, it's the backstory of the Wicked Witch of the West from Oz. Elphaba, the main character, is just a green-skinned social justice warrior. And she realizes that the Wizard of Oz is a charlatan who's manipulating people and scapegoating the oppressed. And she realizes that the more she takes him on, the more he destroys everything she loves. So in the climactic scene towards the end of the second act, the wizard has captured and beaten her lover, and she turns to her spell book to try to save him, but she realizes there's nothing she can do. She sings these words, "No good deed goes unpunished. My road of good intentions led where such roads always lead. Sure, I meant well. Well, look what well meant did." I mean, that's the critique of Proverbs. Actions may speak louder than words, but in the end, what do they get you? Like, what about when they don't make any difference? Where do good intentions actually get us? So like I said, this sermon might suck. But in the end, it won't matter, because it will end, and then you'll move on. So let's just see what happens. So our next friend we're going to meet on this wisdom journey is Ecclesiastes. And Proverbs is easy to memorize, but we actually quote Ecclesiastes all the time. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. That's Ecclesiastes. The fly in the ointment is actually from Ecclesiastes. And then, like Jason said, the most famous part of Ecclesiastes is chapter 3, which the birds actually sing all of if you sing turn, turn, turn. And theologians and pastors tend to hate this book. One scholar writes, the only people who like Ecclesiastes are skeptics, pessimists, nihilists, and alcoholics. And I don't know which one I am, but I love Ecclesiastes. The main character of Ecclesiastes is Koleth. It's Koleth. I think we have this for you to see. It's a Hebrew name, and depending on which version of the Bible you look at, it might be translated as the teacher or the preacher or the organizer, something like that. And that's because we don't actually know what Koleth means. The root kol is the Hebrew root. It's a verb to gather. And that appears to be what Koleth does. They gather little pieces of wisdom, which is why Pastor Sarah and Pastor Ryan and I pictured them as sort of a grad student, collecting and organizing things that they think are true. Kind of like, okay, this one gets it. This thing is true and I need to remember it for later. But it also appears to be a feminine name, because this eth ending is found in lots of female Hebrew names, like Elizabeth or Judith. It seems clear that both Proverbs and Ecclesiastes think that mastering this wisdom is a feminine attribute. But then the narrator tells us that Koleth is a son of King David, and the pronouns for Koleth actually change back and forth from male to female all the time. So there's something like very queer about this Koleth character. And Koleth agrees with Proverbs on one central thing. They believe there is an order to creation, and that by studying that order, we might understand wisdom. They start out by sharing a beautiful poem, so listen to this. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries back to the place where it rises again. The wind blows to the south and then goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. There is nothing new under the sun. And Koleth comes to the conclusion that if you look around and observe the natural world, there are three important truths you need to understand to be wise. So here we go. A standard 3-point sermon. This could really suck. But in the end, it won't matter, because it will end, and you'll move on. So let's just see what happens. So the first thing Koleth wants you to know is everything is vanity. For Koleth, vanity is chasing a wind. It's recognizing that something is a vapor. So it's like smoke. It's constantly moving, constantly changing. You think it's real, but then it changes. For example, Koleth talks about success. They talk about joy found in a hard day's work or the satisfaction of an accomplishment. And they say this, "For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent doing it, and it was all vanity. Like chasing after a wind, there was nothing to be gained under the sun." So if you can master anything, it's all for your own vanity. any success, any promotion, the corner office, owning your own home, good credit, graduating top of your class, giving a really good sermon, it's all vanity. And have you ever experienced this when someone's talking to you about their job? Like maybe this friend works at some sort of millennial startup, and they use like this internal new corporate lingo that you don't quite understand. And when you tell them that you don't understand what this thing means, they give you this look like you're some sort of time traveler. Or maybe like a baby boomer. And it's funny, but we all do this. Like we all talk about our accomplishments as if anyone cares. It's like chasing a wind. Like the success we are chasing is an ever-moving target. It changes nothing if we catch it. Our success doesn't give our lives meaning. It's all vanity. So then it's tempting to think that Koheleth would be a hedonist. But they say that this is also actually vanity. They say this: I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and of provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh, and many concubines. And again, all was vanity, like chasing after a wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So even if you experienced nothing but pleasure, it would change nothing. It would mean nothing. No one would care. So success changes nothing. Feeling good changes nothing. It's all pointless. It's all vanity. But there are other vanities we chase too. Like approval from your family is vanity. It won't actually change anything. Revenge on someone who betrays you, vanity. It won't actually change anything. Even altruism, like wanting the best for other people, doesn't actually matter. It doesn't change anything. It just makes you feel good. So according to Koheleth, no matter what you tell yourself, you are playing a part of your own creation. Like, the maze isn't real. There are no rules to this game. No one else cares. You are doing whatever you are doing for yourself, no matter what you tell yourself. And it's dark, but it actually points to a really deep theological truth. Like, people love to get into arguments about suffering. Like, why is there suffering? Does God cause suffering? Does God use suffering? Why in the world does there have to be suffering? And how vain is that? Like, we think we're above it. Like, those people over there should suffer. But if we're suffering, we aren't living a good life. It's vanity. Like, for Koheleth, suffering is part of living a good life. Everything we do to avoid or alleviate suffering is vanity. Success cannot actually avoid suffering. Understanding can't avoid suffering. Pleasure can't avoid suffering. Apologies, approvals, good reviews, forgiveness, nothing can avoid suffering. Suffering happens when we are leading meaningful lives. Suffering happens when we're fighting good fights. And suffering happens when we realize that nothing we do will matter, but it's still worth doing. There's always a risk we're going to get hurt. And that's being wise, is knowing that getting hurt is guaranteed. To be wise, you have to stop whatever it is you are chasing and realize that you can't resist your suffering. It's all vanity. Whatever it is, no matter what you tell yourself, you're chasing a wind to avoid your suffering. That's the first wise truth of Ecclesiastes. It's fun, right? The second piece of wisdom is that life is random. And this is where Ecclesiastes differs from Proverbs concretely. So where Lady Wisdom offers that the wise live good lives and wicked live in misery, Koheleth completely refutes that. They say this: I saw that under the sun, the race does not always go to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. Koheleth points out that sometimes good things happen, and sometimes bad things happen. The rhythms of the world are beyond our control. And Koleth actually looks to creation to prove this point. This is the part of the famous Turn, Turn, Turn song that we just sang. The turn, turn, turn part isn't in the Bible if you're looking for it. But it's this refrain, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And this actually captures a really indigenous way of thinking about time. Like in observing creation, many indigenous cultures, like our friend Koleth, notice that the world changes on its own time. The land responds to forces of creation, and those forces keep time moving. If there's a dry season, eventually a wet season comes. If there's a cold season, eventually a warm season comes. Like, I think some of you that are from Seattle actually do this, because I've had people tell me, like, oh, it's just the windy season. Like, oh, it's the rainy season. It's the dark season. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. Like, on some level, we get this, but our culture also tends to think of time as linear. And like, I'm not going to suggest that time isn't linear, but I think our linear thinking makes us want to believe that progress is correct. We have to believe that what we do today leads to something better tomorrow. It's like this, if you invest money, it'll pay off tomorrow, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, that kind of thing. Koleth couldn't disagree more. Because, just look around. Like, look at racism. Look at homophobia, like transphobia, immigration. It seems like the arc of the universe just kind of spins in circles. Like the wind, you might say, going to the north and then the south and around and around. And this is what Koleth is saying. Creation determines when it's time to sow and time to harvest. Plants grow on their own time. Healing happens if and when it happens. There's nothing we can do about it. And there are some really ugly seasons in Koleth's poetry, like a time to refrain from embracing, or a time to lose, a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. And I think we could add to that list, couldn't we? Like a time to fail, a time to be disappointed, a time to be unemployed, or to give up and walk away, a time to be embarrassed, and a time to be passed over for something that you really, really deserved. I feel like Koleth would really get off on the phases of grief. Like, yes, there is wisdom in being in denial that life could be so cruel. And there is wisdom in getting angry and punching your pillow and yelling at the sky because this sucks. And there is wisdom at bargaining to figure out how to be in this new reality that changed and you didn't deserve it. And there is wisdom in being depressed and crying and bawling your eyes out or whatever you need to do because this is trauma. But Koleth lands on acceptance. The wisdom comes from accepting reality and understanding what to do now. For Koleth, wisdom comes not from judging your circumstance as good or bad, because that would be vanity. It's chasing a wind. Wisdom comes not from trying to change things, because that also would be vanity. It's chasing a wind. Wisdom comes from understanding what season you are in and being fully present to that season. Wisdom is recognizing that life isn't leading anywhere. Things like the way it was or the way I want it to be or this thing I worked for aren't reality. All of it is. There's a season for everything, and wisdom is accepting whatever season you are in. So the first piece of wisdom is anything that avoids suffering is vanity. The second piece of wisdom is life is random and beyond your control. And I held up 3 fingers for the second one. The third piece of wisdom is you are going to die. The way Koleth says it is this: everything that confronts the wise is vanity, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to those who sacrifice and to those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners. To those who swear oaths are like those who shun an oath. In all that happens under the sun, the same fate comes to everyone. Everyone is going to die. If you are a fool, you will die. If you're wise, you will die. If you are wicked, you'll die. And if you're righteous, you're dead too. And for Koleth, this is what gives urgency to understanding the first 2 points. They say it like this: vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from the toil under the sun, at which they toil? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. Vanity becomes clear in the face of death. When you die, no one at your company cares that you were ever there. Nothing you did will last. No pain that you endured will have mattered. No fun night out that you had will ever be remembered. And no apology that you waited for will have been worth it. The best and worst days of your life will be irrelevant. You did it all for you, and then you died. And understanding the seasonality of life is also so important before you die, because if you don't give in to the moment that you're in right now, you're wasting this moment. If you're trying to get out of this moment or get back to normal or get ahead or wait for the right time or urgently change your moment in any way, you are wasting the only moment that you are guaranteed. Koleth says it like this: for no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity when it suddenly falls upon them. You know, you could die before the pandemic ends, wishing that it was over. You could die before seeing justice, lamenting the pain in the world. You could die before you find a better job, miserable in the work that you have now. You could die before you save enough money to travel and never see the world. You could die without ever speaking your truth, and your truth would die with you. And in reality, when we're talking about death, could isn't even the right word, right? Like the right word is will. And so this is the third point of wisdom in Ecclesiastes. Your life won't matter when you are dead. Your suffering won't have mattered when you are dead. Whatever meaning you think your life has is merely your own understanding, and it won't matter either. So this sermon could really suck. But in the end, it won't matter, because it will end, and then you'll move on. So let's just see what happens, shall we? I mean, in Wicked, Elphaba eventually comes to the same conclusion. She sings, "One question haunts and hurts, too much to mention. Was I really seeking good or just seeking attention? Is that all good deeds are when looked at with an ice-cold eye? If that's all good deeds are, maybe that's the reason why no good deed goes unpunished." And they say the only people who like Ecclesiastes are skeptics, pessimists, nihilists, and alcoholics. And I still don't know which one I am, but I do love Ecclesiastes so very much. Because while it's uncomfortable and it's countercultural and it's super, super unpopular, this is good news. This is liberation. Like, this is gospel truth. Because here is the gospel according to Koleth. God is not found in the vanities that you chase. God is found in giving up the chase and embracing your suffering. God is not found in meaning-making or being happy. God is found in being present to whatever moment your life is in. And God is not found in fighting to control your life. God is found in surrender. So how does this good news from Ecclesiastes help us to live well? Well, like this. There is no pressure to be anything in this world. Your life is exactly what it is supposed to be. You are exactly where you are supposed to be right now. Your heartache is real, and it is valid. And while your suffering will make no difference to anyone or change the world in any way, if you embrace it, you may grow from it. And you might as well embrace it, because like you can't avoid suffering. You cannot understand the meaning of your own story, and nothing you do will guarantee you a good life. You can just show up and be present in the moment. You can be open to whatever happens next, to like what must happen next. But it's not your job to control your life, and it's not your job to understand your life. It's only your job to live your life. Colette says it like this, and I think we have this one for you on the screen. Go, eat your bread with enjoyment, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has long ago approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Do not let oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with a partner whom you love. Enjoy the days of your vain life that are given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil, at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do with all your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in the death to which you are going. In other words, Colette says, carpe diem. Seize the day. Live life while you have it. Don't live to impress anyone. Don't live for your own pleasure, but live fully present to the story that is uniquely your own. Controlling nothing, step into every day and accept graciously whatever God gives you. That feels like good news to me. Do you feel it? So that's Ecclesiastes, our second book of wisdom. Proverbs tells us that our actions and choices matter, and Ecclesiastes tells us that life is too short to try and avoid suffering. And together, they really make us think about what it means to live well and to live a good life. So next week, you'll meet our friend Job, and Job's story is a little different. Like, it's this really fantastical tale where Job, this righteous and wise man, suffers and loses everything. And you're going to hear voices that sound a lot like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. But Job is going to want to push us a little bit further. Because if Proverbs says that the wise are rewarded, then how do we explain what happens to Job? And if Ecclesiastes says that, well, suffering is just part of living a meaningful life, then what does that say about God? But that's for next week. This week, we sit with Ecclesiastes. Life is short, and then you die. Like, it's fun. But as you sit with these dark truths, may you know this. Living a good life may change nothing. Your good life may be absolutely insignificant, but it still matters to God. And in whatever ways you suffer, in whatever pointless existence you have, God is with you in it. All of your vain days under the sun. So, this sermon might have sucked, but it's over now, and you can move on. So let's just see what happens. Amen?